of life in the early church, in the early Christian community. They were of one mind and spirit. They held their possessions in common, and they witnessed to the resurrection. Different translations say it different ways. They were one in body and in mind and spirit. They were one in mind and soul. They didn't say, "This is mine, you can't have it." They didn't say, "This is mine," but they shared all their possessions. They gave powerful testimony to the resurrection. They gave strong witness to the resurrection. They told people about the resurrection of Jesus. It's said in various ways. And I think, what's of those three things, what would be the hardest for us to do? What would be the hardest for you to do? To be of one mind and spirit with other people? That's kind of hard, unless, you're with everybody who thinks alike. But you watch the news channels, and it's hard to be of one mind and spirit. You listen to the political campaigns, it's hard to be of one mind and spirit. You look at what's going on in any major city, it's hard to be of one mind and spirit. It's difficult. Sharing our possessions, that's difficult too. It is mine, it's not yours. That's difficult. And for some of us, just bearing witness to the resurrection, my gosh, I'm not going to get up and talk to people about Jesus. I wouldn't know what to say. They might come back at me. Some people think this really isn't a description. It's more a prescription of what the church ought to be doing. It's not just, it's not what it is doing, it's what it ought to be doing. What is at the root? What needs to take place for people to be of one mind and spirit, for them to have this spirit of sharing and to give witness to the resurrection? Buried in the middle of this passage is this line, "And great grace was among them all." There was an abundance of grace with them. I think the root to these things that were happening in the early Christian community is grace. We know grace when we see it. I used that line several years ago here. I don't know if anybody was here when I used that line. And I said, it's a lot like the Supreme Court Justice said about pornography. I know it when I see it. Do you remember who was here that Sunday? There were people disrupting us. Yeah, for being inclusive. And, I kind of got a kick out of realizing that they heard that line. We know grace when we see it. We might not be able to find it, but we know it when we see it. And grace is one of those religious words that makes a great transition and an easy transition into everyday life. And it has cognates in gracious, grateful, gratitude. Grace is something we don't earn or merit or deserve. It's freely given. The gracious person, focuses on the other and thinks of the other. The gracious person takes time and listens. Grace is again, we don't earn it or deserve it. Grace is, the moon this week. We didn't earn or deserve it. It's something we can just receive. Grace is a baby's smile when we look at it. We didn't earn that or deserve it. Grace is a good night's sleep. Grace is the taste of, strawberries. Grace is having somebody who loves us. We can't make people love us. Grace is this wonderful experience in life that makes room and takes space for the other. And I think that grace is at the root of what was happening in the early church. They were of one mind and spirit. Well, when there is grace working among people, there can be the possibility of one mind and spirit. because we listen. We don't do all the talking. We don't need to control the situation. We give space for the other person, and we hear what they have to say. You know, this week has been, it's been a tough week for our city. The shooting of the young King boy was a tragedy. And I went on Friday to a meeting of clergy, and Kim was there, and Mayor Ginther was there, and the safety director was there, and I thought, man, I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to say. And it was handled with such grace. Kim said really good stuff about listening and being accessible and being approachable. And I thought, you know, when we have this spirit of grace in our leadership, there's a shot that we have for unity and oneness in our community. John Wesley, when he talks about unity, says we should have unity in the essentials, liberty in the non-essentials, and love in all things. And I think, man, that is gracious. That is gracious. It's giving room and latitude. It's not expecting everybody to be like me and to think like me. That's ungrace. Wesley also has a sermon where he says, we might disagree on a lot of things in religion. We might disagree on how to do baptism, when to do baptism. We might disagree on how to do communion, how often to do it, how a church should be organized. But then he says, if your heart is with mine, put your hand in mine. I think, man, this oneness, this listening, this openness of unity in heart and mind, the church needs that. The church needs that. And grace is at the root of this sharing of possessions. You know, it's mine. You can't have it. That's very ungracious. Grace looks to share. They shared all their possessions, and no one is in need. That's a gracious community. In Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck says, maybe the most revolutionary thought in human history is the movement from my to ours and me to we. That takes grace to make that movement. But when it's there, sharing happens. The Bible is really, particularly the New Testament, is full of examples of grace. What grace does, basically, is offer new life. You know, when somebody loves us, we're offered new life. When somebody listens to us and gives us space, we're offered new life. Grace in this new life is all through the Bible. I mean, almost everything about Jesus is grace. It says early in Luke, he grew up full of wisdom and grace. That he welcomes a prostitute at the table. He offers her new life. That he eats with Zacchaeus. He offers him grace and new life. That he forgives a person, gives them the grace of new life. That he feeds the hungry, gives them the grace of new life. That he heals people is the grace of new life. It's all through the Bible. And the greatest example of grace of new life is the resurrection. One of the things that amazes me, maybe the thing that amazes me about the resurrection, is that Jesus comes back. That I don't think it's that hard for God to raise somebody from the dead. I mean, if you created the universe, you can raise somebody from the dead. But I think if I had been treated the way Jesus was treated, if people had betrayed me and denied me and tortured me and mocked me and deserted me and denied and killed me, I'm not sure I would go back to those people. And I'm not sure I would forgive them. And I'm not sure that I would love them. But the grace that Jesus offers in the resurrection, that God offers in the resurrection, is this gift of new life, where he offers a new start to everybody and says, you are forgiven. Let's start over. That's an extraordinary experience of grace. And I think what happens in the resurrection is this explosion of grace, where it's offered to everyone, not just the community that was following him, but everyone is offered this grace and this new life, this possibility of new life. And it's transforming when we're offered. When somebody loves us, it's transforming. When somebody forgives us, it's transforming. When we're made whole, it's transforming. And that's what happened in this early community of Christians. They accepted the grace of the resurrection. And they offered it. They knew it was offered to all, and they went around talking about it and offering it to all. We want you to know that you have this gift of new life. Certainly, the early Christian community talked about the resurrection. Certainly, they preached about it. I mean, it's in Acts. They went around talking that God's love is stronger than hate, that good is stronger than evil, that life is stronger than death, that in the end, God has the final word. Certainly, they talked about that. But I also think the grace created gracious living, where they lived the resurrection. They forgave people. They treated people as equal. Slaves and owners were equal in the community. They were given new life. They treated the poor and gave food and clothing to the poor. They were hospitable. People saw that, this gracious living where people didn't say, this is mine, not yours. It says in the Bible that they witnessed to the resurrection with great power. Now that could mean dynamic preaching. Maybe it does. It can also mean attractive living, that people saw their living and wanted to be part of that. Yesterday when I went to the dedication of the Habitat House in Urban Crest, the street was full of parked cars, and I had to park a block and a half away because all the people were at the house for the dedication. And as I was walking up the street, this car pulled over, and he said, "You're dedicating the Habitat House, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'd like to get in on that. How can I volunteer to help?" And I thought, the powerful attraction of the Christian community. I want to be part of that. There's a story, my theology professor told this. I've never read it anywhere, but since my theology professor told this, it must be true. And he told us the story of the great theologian Karl Barth in just before World War II, that he was Swiss, and he and his community made a very vocal, dramatic statement against the Nazis. And the Nazis confronted him about, what gives you the authority? What gives you the authority to stand up against us? And Barth said, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I wonder if that could be an explanation for what we do. Why did you forgive that person? The resurrection of Jesus Christ. It offers new life. Why did you share with that person the resurrection of Jesus Christ? It gives new life. Why did you invite that person the resurrection of Jesus Christ? It gives new life. This text from Acts has specific things in it of the early Christian community. It was of one mind and spirit. It shared its possessions. It witnessed to the resurrection. I'm not sure the details matter as much as the source of what caused the details. When we have that source of grace in our life, we can take those details and create our own details and go in many directions. A detail of the Christian community at King Avenue can be Habitat for Humanity. It can be making sandwiches for New Life. It can be volunteering at Hubbard School. It can be donating to NEMAP. It can be going to Mexico. It can be lots of ways of offering new life and the grace of the resurrection to people. There are countless ways. It can be leading a class. It can be teaching children. It can be singing in the choir. How we offer the grace of new life. So is this a description of how the church is, or is it a prescription of how the church ought to be? I think through the grace of God, we can make it a description of how the church is. May it be so.